Canadian executives across the country grappling with a number of big issues that are affecting their business operations and investment sentiment. Of course, this includes the ongoing rail blockades and the threat of the coronavirus spreading globally. BNN Bloomberg spoke with Don Walker, the head of Magna. It's the third largest global auto parts manufacturer. He shared how his company is adapting to the outbreak.
Well, it's a moving target. We have about 20,000 people in China. We had 5 employees that had the virus. 4 are better, and 1 we think is in a good way. So I think taking the lead from the Chinese government, the first thing was try and isolate it. We shut down our factories. Most of our factories are now up and running. Maybe not full production, but getting there. I think we've got 3 of our 50 that are still coming up. A lot of our supply base, other suppliers are now running again. A lot of the car companies are running again. So depending on what happens with the outbreak and if they slow it down over there, it looks like production seems to be getting back up and running. We haven't quantified what the impact will be to our financially because we don't know yet. It'll be interesting to see whether the slowdown in the production over the past month in China will impact vehicle production in North America or Europe, but the car makers and the suppliers are all looking at the supply chain and trying to figure that out.
So a personal experience for your company to have employees that are affected by that. What was your reaction to that? I mean, how do you deal with that as a CEO?
Well, the first thing we did is we tried to be responsible and listen to what we thought we should do, what the governments want us to do. First thing we did is we restricted travel. We actually gave some money over there to the areas our employees are. We had masks. We're doing everything we think are the right things to do, but also taking the lead from the government. And beyond that, we'll just have to see if there's an outbreak, what measures do the people who are dealing with the situation are recommending. So we want to be a good corporate citizen and figure what to do, and also work very closely with our customers to say what's the best way to try and keep production going.
Would you get a sense, you mentioned some of the production activity that could be coming, as someone who knows the ins and outs of your industry and your own operations, what signs should people be looking for if they're trying to determine if business is getting back to normal? What are the kinds of things that investors should be watching for?
Well, I think ultimately the investors would have to talk to the automakers, because the automakers are the one that have to take all these products and get them in just in time. I think they're trying to assess it, and they're also learning ways they can make sure they get the parts, whether they have to air freight them or not. If there's shortages, they would put it on vehicles where there's already lots of inventory out there, I assume. So I think the investors would have to take a look at what the car makers are saying, because they're going to know. So
there are a lot of moving parts here in Canada, just because we're watching coronavirus. We had been observing the rail blockades. You had shared your views with us on that, and since you made some comments with us on that, we have now heard in the energy industry on Teck Resources moving away from a major oil sands project. I guess in terms of the outlook for Canada and investing in Canada, how do you feel about the environment right now?
Well, I think the whole renegotiation of NAFTA, the USMCA, I'm hoping that'll get past the government very quickly. In Canada, it has to. I think that will alleviate people's concerns about investing in Canada if they didn't know if they could have access to our biggest market, the States. I think within the automotive industry, I think the whole NAFTA makes the NAFTA region more competitive when they compete against other regions, and we're going to see more sourcing because they have a regional value content. So that should be good for Magna. We're the biggest supplier here by quite a bit for sales, and I think it'll be good for the industry. As far as Canada is concerned, hopefully we have a level playing field if we're competing with the United States, because the same sort of cost drivers. As far as Canada being seen as being open for business, I think the new Ontario government is much more, is trying very hard to make it a good place for businesses to invest money. They're trying to get rid of regulations. They're trying to allow businesses to run their business and not handcuff them in a lot of different ways. I do worry about the perception, though. If you look at the GO train, running Magna is complicated enough. I'm really happy I'm not a politician. If you look at the politicians, they're trying to make the best decision, and quite often they're being influenced by who yells the most in media, what the story is. I'm an engineer, I like to deal with facts and science. What I would hope is we boil the decisions and the discussion down to factual-based discussions. The more that we interrupt people, potentially put people or things at safety at risk, or disrupt production here, movement of goods, that's making businesses less competitive. It's affecting jobs, it's affecting revenue to the government, to the point where if we don't develop our own natural resources, and sure, we have to be concerned about the environment, but if we don't develop them, the world's still going to require these. They're going to go to other countries, will take advantage of that. Means our standard of living goes down, we have less money to pay for helping people that need the help. So I think we need to have a more intelligent, fact-based discussion on this. And again, I'm not sure how the government is going to deal with it, but I do get very frustrated when I see people doing things that I just don't think they're proper.
Just to tie it back to investors, because there's sometimes questions about whether or not there's less investment coming to Canada because of some of these concerns we're talking about. You're running a global business. You're focusing on the future for Magna. Does this issue come up with any of your investors who maybe are global and asking about the environment here in Canada?
Not a lot, because we had a lot of questions about what's going on in Canada, but I think for the most part, investors are looking at, are they going to invest in the company because we have the right strategy? Are we growing? Are we growing our profitability? Do we have good cash flow? And Magna has all of those. I hope we can continue to invest. We've invested over $1 billion in our our Ontario plants between 2017 up to 2020. So we still see it as a good place to invest in because we've got a great workforce here. If we see things deteriorate in Canada, then we wouldn't be competitive to win business, which means our investments will go down. So it's not very complicated, quite frankly. We just need to work together in this country to try and come up with a strategy that raises the prosperity of everybody, and not everybody looking at things individually.